As I said, in ethics or ethical theory, we know four different utilitarians. Is the first ethical theory. Utilitarianism is the creation of Bentham, even though the first one was not Bentham. Bentham is the philosopher published in 1789, the book. You know who was the first one? It was Guicciardini and Machiavelli. Now you can find, I have recently found references where they were the first to lay down the idea of utilitarianism. But you know, Italians are Italians, and so they have ideas, but they do not develop them. And so Bentham, he took, you know, Hobbes, Thomas Hobbes, English, he started from Machiavelli. And Manville, after Hobbes, went another step forward until we reach Bentham. Now, that is the first, and the utilitarian, all economists know that, because 90% of economic theory is based on utilitarianism. I said 90% to mean a vast majority, even though not all economists. For instance, Amartya Sen is not a utilitarian. He wrote many books against utilitarianism. And nowadays, his ideas are, I wouldn't say accepted by everybody, but they are spreading, etc. Now, the second one is contractualism, or neo-contractualism. John Rawls and David Gauthier. These are Americans. They are the heroes of contractualism. The third one is deontologism. And deontologism, Immanuel Kant, even though he's not the only one, but he's the hero of deontology. And finally, the fourth one is the virtue ethics, or the ethic of virtue. And the virtue ethics was born with Aristotle. Went along over time, Thomas Aquinas and many other philosophers until recent time, etc. Now the question is, how do we choose between them? Suppose that we accept the idea that in dealing with the globalization in economic methods, we need to refer to an ethical argument. Okay, suppose that we have accepted. I mean, my previous argument has convinced you. Now, the second question is, which one of the four should we choose? That is still an open question. And that is important to debate on that. And then I have to congratulate with this university that you have chosen to reflect on this issue. Because really, that is an open question. Why? Because utilitarianism, until the globalization era, was the dominant. Homo economicus, you know the story of Homo economicus. Homo economicus is utilitarianism. And if you open any textbooks, until a few years ago, nobody could in economics, no students could say, I do not accept Homo economicus. The professor would frank him or her. So everybody was supposed to repeat, yes, I believe in Homo economicus, blah, 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 etc., etc. Yes, I teach, as Ignazio said, at Johns Hopkins University in Bologna, which is an American university. A few years ago, there was a professor, a colleague of ours, coming from the States. And in a sort of a discussion, at a certain point, he pointed the finger against me and said, you do not believe in Homo economicus? Because and they said, yes, I do not believe, because you see, I like science. In science, the word belief does not exist. You have to demonstrate, not to believe. In faith, if we talk about faith, you can be a believer or a non-believer. But I said, you are an American, you should know what does mean neo-positivism. So what do you say that you are a believer in Homo economicus? That he kept silent. Now, the fact that utility nowadays is in crisis has opened the question. Would you move in this direction, in that, or in that direction? As I said, now why utilitarianism is in crisis? That is interesting. Because utilitarianism is more or less okay in an economy producing goods. But when we enter the realm of finance, disaster. Why? Because in the production of commodities or goods, utilitarianism has a law
which everybody knows, is the law of decreasing marginal utility. Now, consider the philosophical meaning of the law of decreasing marginal utility, which was discovered by Gossen, the famous German economist. Gossen was a great economist, even though the English-speaking people never wanted to admit that Gossen was better than them, because understandable reason, it's part of the game. But he was already able to say, look, this law, the law of decreasing margin, has a philosophical ground, not a technical one, which we represent with the curve, downward sloping, etc. But in the world of, in other words, if I keep on eating breads or sandwiches, after a certain number of sandwiches, I stop. Because you see, otherwise I get sick, etc., etc. In other words, this law, in the realm of the production of commodity, is a sort of counterbalance. But in the realm of finance, there is not. Because there is no upper limit to the accumulation of money. You gain 1 billion, then you want 2 billion. Then you, in other words, the law of decreasing marginal utility, which is fundamental, does not apply to the realm of finance. Try to think. And that is something that no economist points at. And that, in my opinion, is not fair, not to say the truth, in particular to the students, etc. And so that is why utilitarianism nowadays is lacking ground, etc. So that is why there are people who support contractualism, other deontologists. In other words, we need rules. What Ignazio said before, more regulation. Those who advocate more regulation on the part of the states are deontologists. And other, and I am among them, I like the ethical virtue, because I have my preferences. So everybody has it. I like preferences, virtues. Because this is an ethical approach, which in my opinion, but I mean, my opinion, it's of no value, it's a value as the opinion of everybody else, is the ethical approach which is more capable than anybody else to cope with the new problem raised by globalization. I mentioned the problem of the political trilemma, the problem of inequality. I could have mentioned the problem of conflict of identity. Now, try to solve the conflict of identity, gender, for instance, women and men, on the basis of deontology. Try. In my opinion, it's impossible. In fact, there are no solutions. If you take the ethical virtue approach, you can find a way. But again, I have finished my time. I'd like to say that it's a new field of inquiry, and it is fascinating to notice that when we come to these issues, we need really dialogue. Economists, philosophers, sociologists, political theorists, they have to converge in order to make, let's say, this dialogue possible. Perhaps that is one of the reasons of the success of this school, of this university, where people coming from different streams of research converge to exchange their. Thank you very much.